Wars, the appetite. Welcome back, guys. This is Gaming with Austin, and today we're on part 14. A futuristic mansion. And today, what we're gonna do this episode. Is I'm gonna clear out more land. Would be like if there was a disease out there that not only caused macrosomia, but also maternal hypoglycemia. As well as a perpetually insatiable appetite, in which the appetite problem only got worse with age, in which bones became more brittle as the patient got older, in which their insatiable appetite ultimately progressed to the point to where they think about killing and eating people. When food is absent, they resort to trying to commit murder just to eat their flesh. Like, it not only resulted in maternal hypoglycemia, but the disorder ended up putting the mother into insulin shock to the point of death. And muscles and bones got weaker as the patient got older, despite being ordered to consume more vitamin D. And they ended up developing seizures, too. Like, not like those petit mal seizures that some people have, but full-on grand mal seizures. That'd be a very cruel disorder. That'd be a pretty cruel disorder. And the most obvious sign was maternal like, the first obvious sign that the child has the disorder is sudden, like, acute maternal hypoglycemia. Then the next symptom didn't show up until birth, in which the baby is heavier than they're supposed to weigh for their age at birth. And it'd be a pretty cruel disorder to have. So cruel to where locking up the food would not be an option at all. Like, if they lose any amount of fat, their bones could become so brittle that even touching the bone can actually cause it to shatter as if it was made of glass. And it also caused an extremely insatiable appetite, like even worse than that of PWS, like to the point where, like, insatiable appetite progressed to the point where patients with the disorder actually resort to cannibalism just to try to satisfy their insatiable appetite. That'd be a pretty cruel disorder. Can you close my door, Mom? The disorder would basically become like Prader-Willi syndrome and ROHAD, both on steroids. Because I get that PWS alters your behavior, making you more prone to stubbornness and temper tantrums. Got hungrier as they ate more. No amount of exercise could stop them. There was nothing the parent could do. Left to their own like, their appetite became more insatiable as they got older, to the point where they literally want to kill and eat people. Kind of like the case with Sparage. PWS it's a cruel disorder as it is. But that disorder I'm talking about, it's currently unnamed. If that disorder was to happen, those with that disorder would have to be locked up in a special institution to make sure they don't kill and eat people. Patients with that disorder would not be allowed to exercise at all, because they could end up with a bone fracture. If that disorder was to really happen, because ROHAD causes people to eat while they're causes people to sleepwalk and eat while they're sleepwalking. They wouldn't even be aware that they are sleepwalking. Those with the disorder, they wouldn't be aware that they are sleepwalking. Those with the... Because very little is known about ROHAD except it causes sudden onset of obesity. Like, the patient was previously seemingly healthy until they suddenly started gaining weight very quickly. Like, what I mean by sudden is they end up gaining like 20 to 30 pounds in like 6 to 12 months. That type of weight gain is kind of painful. The reason I'm clearing out land is so I could set up a bowling alley. Just like Prader-Willi syndrome, ROHAD is a pretty cruel disorder. Patients with that disorder are robbed of their ability to control their weight even to the slightest extent. They are robbed of their ability to do that. Let me tell you, it's a pretty cruel disorder. Kind of like Prader-Willi syndrome is. It's a pretty cruel disorder. Want to know what can cause rapid onset weight gain, especially in women? Polycystic ovarian syndrome can cause rapid onset weight gain in women. But that weight gain is actually caused by an excess amount of testosterone. Because testosterone is known to stimulate your appetite. Steroids in general are known to do that. Another reason why I'm unlike Prader-Willi syndrome, in which patients suddenly start gaining weight to the point of becoming obese within early childhood, the cruel disorder that is currently unnamed, which there are no known cases right now, would show up like the one born with the disorder would be obviously obese at birth. That is called that type of obesity is called macrosomia, aka congenital obesity. Congenital obesity. Macrosomia is also known as congenital obesity, because babies with macrosomia are almost always born obese. They are obese. They've been obese since the day they were born. That's what macrosomia is. It's also known as congenital obesity. Those who do survive to adulthood with that unnamed disorder, like that causes not only acute maternal hypoglycemia, but also macrosomia, and an insatiable appetite that only gets worse with age, and violent outbursts, like so bad that the patient sometimes actually ends up killing people just to eat their flesh to satisfy their insatiable hunger. Yeah, that disorder would be like Rohad and Prader-Willi syndrome on steroids. There is a chance that Rohad might be congenital. It might be congenital. Because I know Batten disease, which is a catch-all for a group of disorders called neuronal ceroid lipofuscinosis, Batten disease is actually congenital. It's definitely congenital. Because it's a genetic disorder. But that unnamed disorder, that has no known cases whatsoever, would definitely be congenital, as symptoms would show up before the baby's even born. Would actually end up showing up even before the baby's born. Before the baby's even born. Symptoms would show up before the baby's even born. But you know, Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome is... Most people who have that disorder often die before they're even born. Researchers into Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome suggest it might actually be the cause of almost all the abortions out there, all the miscarriages. There's actually a bit of artificial... The reason that I'm doing a bit of underwater construction is because... I'm constructing some artificial islands. The mansion starts at the 4th layer above sea level. And sea level is y-axis equal to 62. My critique I have against prostitution and selling yourself for sex, selling sex, is the critique I have. A lot of it has to do with HIV and other STDs. That's the only critique I have against legalizing it. If we were to legalize prostitution, it would have to be regulated. And for good reason. This is kind of like how the Dutch is adding land to their country. What I'm doing is kind of like how the Dutch is doing it. There are people out there who have weird cravings for food. Sometimes they end up... There are women who go on their periods who have a sudden desire to crave raw meat. It's kind of disgusting. There are people out there who crave raw meat. There are people out there who suddenly have a desire, who suddenly have a desire to crave raw meat. It's kind of disgusting. This is more like it's not just... If your dog is eating their own excrement, they're not alone. In nature, dogs have to do that. They don't have a choice. Because in nature, dogs don't just eat the flesh and bones of the animals they scavenge. They eat the entire animal. They eat the entire animal in one sitting. They don't just eat the flesh and bones. They eat the entire animal, including the organs. Imposing a calorie restriction and sticking to that, that's actually and freaking out when you consume more than that, that's actually an eating disorder called orthorexia nervosa. You have to vary your caloric intake in order to be healthy. Because it's more about what you're eating that affects your physique. It's actually more about what you're eating that affects your physique than how much you're eating. how much you exercise, too. It's actually more about what you're eating. Because how many calories you consume affects your weight. But, you know, what you're eating affects your physique more than your body composition, more than exercise. The amount of protein you consume can determine, like, relative to your caloric consumption, can actually determine how much fat you can lose. If the food tastes like cardboard, that not only does it mean that the food lacks flavor, but it potentially means that the food is not very nutritious at all. That potentially means the food is not very nutritious. Meaning there's almost no nutrition in that. Because when you remove fats from foods, like peanut butter, you're not just removing the flavor involved. You're also removing nutrients, too. Now, I do follow a high-carb, high-protein diet. Because that's the best diet to pack on muscle. About 90... Most of your physique is actually controlled by what you're eating. If you're wondering what's causing obesity rates to rise despite government efforts to curb the epidemic, you might have to blame it on air pollution. Because that's actually a pretty big environmental factor to obesity. What I'm doing to help expand, so I could fortify the mansion, I'm using the same tactic the Dutch are using to expand. Artificially adding land to what is naturally oceanic. You know, putting a tax on our junk food would probably not work. How? Is that it might not work at all? what I'm doing to help expand, so I could build the city, like in the Future series, which would be the sequel to my Futuristic Mansion series. I'm using the same tactics the Dutch are using to expand their territory. They're not stealing land from other countries because that's not nice. Instead of stealing land, they're expanding out into the ocean. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm using the same tactics the Dutch are using. I told you it'll be at least 10,000 square feet. In fact, it's a lot more than that now. Believe it or not, there's a Dutch YouTuber who's pretty popular. His name is Kwebbelkop. He's not the only popular Dutch YouTuber. There's also Jelly, whose real name is Jelly Van Boost. the base plate for the house was at about 4 blocks above sea level. In Minecraft terms. Or about 4 meters, to be exact. And anyways, this should wrap up the video. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more. This is Gaming with Alston signing off. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram and Twitter for more content like this. As always, thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more, and tschüss.